Think back to a summer when you were 8 years old. It felt endless. School let out and the days stretched on forever, each one packed with new discoveries. Now think about last summer. It probably felt like it lasted about a week. You didn't imagine that. Your brain actually processes time differently now than it did back then. And the reason why is far stranger than simply getting older. Your brain doesn't have a clock. Not really. There's no ticking mechanism inside your skull, counting seconds like a stopwatch. Instead, your brain builds its sense of time out of memory, specifically out of how much new information it had to process during a given stretch of hours. More new information means more memory gets laid down. More memory laid down means that period feels longer when you look back on it. Less new information means less memory. And less memory means the days blur together and vanish. This is called the reminiscence bump, and psychologist David Rubin spent years studying it. Rubin found that when people are asked to recall memories from across their entire lives, an enormous number of those memories cluster between the ages of 10 and 30. Not childhood, not old age, that specific 20-year window. Why there? Because that's when almost everything is happening for the first time. Your first kiss, your first job, moving out, falling in love, losing someone. Each of these events forces your brain to encode dense, detailed memories because everything about them is unfamiliar. Now compare that to your daily commute at 35. Same road, same turns, same coffee shop. Your brain has already built a map for this. It doesn't need to record every detail anymore. So it doesn't. It runs the routine on autopilot and saves its energy for something new. But here's the strange part. Nothing new means nothing gets stored. And nothing stored means when you look back, that stretch of time seems to have barely happened at all. There's a phrase for this. Claudia Hammond, a psychologist who has spent much of her career researching time perception, calls it the holiday paradox. On vacation, a single day crammed with unfamiliar streets, new food, and unexpected detours can feel like it lasted forever while you're living it. But when you get home and think back on the whole trip, it feels like it flew by. Meanwhile, a routine week at work drags by painfully slow in the moment. Yet when you look back on that same week a month later, you can barely remember a single day of it. Time in the moment and time in memory are not the same thing. Your brain is telling you two different stories and both of them are running at once. So why does this pattern intensify so sharply after 20? Partly because childhood is engineered for novelty. You are learning to walk, to read, to make friends, to understand your own body. Every single day delivers a fire hose of first-time experiences, whether you're 8 or 18. But somewhere around your 20s, life quietly restructures itself. You settle into a job, a relationship, a neighborhood, a routine. The rate at which new information floods in slows down dramatically, and your brain's memory-based clock slows down right along with it. There's also a mathematical explanation, one that's been discussed since the 19th century by the French philosopher Paul Janet. He proposed that we experience time proportionally to the amount of life we've already lived. A single year to a 5-year-old is 1/5 of their entire existence. To a 50-year-old, that same year is only 1/50th. The unit hasn't changed, your relationship to it has. Each year becomes a smaller and smaller fraction of the total, so it feels correspondingly smaller and smaller as it passes. But proportional theory alone doesn't explain everything. If it did, time should speed up at a smooth, predictable rate every single year of your life. It doesn't. Neuroscientist David Eagleman has studied how the brain constructs the experience of duration, and his research suggests something more dynamic is going on. Eagleman found that fear and novelty can actually stretch subjective time, flooding the brain with so much information that a few seconds of a car crash can feel like it unfolds in slow motion. The same mechanism, in reverse, explains why a comfortable, familiar decade can compress down to what feels like a single blurry memory. Here's where it gets stranger still. This isn't just about how your life feels. It's a survival mechanism your ancestors needed, a brain that treats every unfamiliar rustle in the grass as urgent, memory-worthy information was a brain that noticed danger fast and remembered exactly where it came from. A brain that didn't waste resources memorizing the 400th walk down the same familiar path was a brain that conserved energy for the moments that actually mattered. Your sense of accelerating time isn't a glitch. It's an ancient filtering system built for a world where paying attention to everything would have gotten you killed and paying attention to nothing would have too. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If your brain only remembers what's new and your 20s are the last stretch of life engineered for firsts, does that mean the rest of your life is destined to disappear in a blur? Not necessarily, because the mechanism cuts both ways. If routine shrinks time, novelty expands it. And novelty isn't something that only childhood or your 20s can offer. It's something you can manufacture deliberately at any age. Psychologists studying memory formation have found that breaking a routine, even in small ways, forces the brain to pay attention again. A new route to work, a conversation with a stranger, a weekend in a city you've never visited. None of these have to be dramatic. They just have to be unfamiliar enough that your brain can't run them on autopilot. Each one becomes a small anchor point, a piece of dense memory your brain will actually store, which means each one becomes a moment your future self will be able to look back on and feel like it actually happened instead of dissolving into the gray static of every other unremarkable Tuesday. This is why people who travel frequently, change careers, or take up new skills later in life often report that their years feel fuller, richer, and longer than the years of people who settle into unchanging routines. Even when both groups are living through the exact same number of days, it was never really about the calendar. It was always about how much of that calendar your brain actually bothered to write down. There's a reason this pattern shows up so consistently across cultures and generations, and it has to do with how memory itself is built. Your brain doesn't store experiences the way a camera stores footage frame by frame in order. It stores landmarks. Psychologist William Friedman, who has spent decades researching how people perceive the passage of time, found that humans don't actually track duration directly. Instead, you reconstruct how much time has passed by counting the landmarks you can remember and estimating the gaps between them. Fewer landmarks means a shorter perceived stretch of time, even if the actual number of days was identical. This is why a chaotic, memory-dense month at 22 can feel longer in hindsight than a quiet, uneventful year at 40. Think about what a landmark actually requires. It requires disruption. A landmark can't be built out of a day that looked exactly like the day before it. Your brain needs contrast to register that it's crossed into new territory. This is precisely why school years feel so vivid looking back. Every September delivered a new teacher, a new classroom, a new set of friends, and often a growth spurt on top of it. The structure itself forced novelty on you, whether you wanted it or not. Once you leave that structure behind, no one is going to force new landmarks into your life for you. You have to build them yourself, or your brain simply won't have anything to count. This is also why major life transitions, even painful ones, often stand out with unusual clarity. A breakup, a move to a new city, a layoff. These moments are frequently the ones people remember down to the smell of the room or the exact sentence someone said. Not because the events were pleasant, but because they were disruptive enough that your brain treated them as essential information worth encoding in high resolution. Comfort, ironically, is what erodes memory. Struggle and change, for all their discomfort, are what preserve it. There's a broader pattern hiding underneath all of this, and it explains why the 20s specifically function as such a sharp turning point. Childhood is built entirely out of forced novelty. You have no choice but to encounter the world for the first time over and over because you are new to almost everything. Somewhere in your 20s, though, a strange trade happens. You gain the freedom to choose your own life, and in exchange, you lose the guarantee that new experiences will simply arrive on their own. Adulthood hands you autonomy and quietly takes away the built-in machinery that used to manufacture memorable time for you automatically. Most people don't notice this trade happening. They notice only the result years later, when they try to recall their late 20s or their 30s and find, to their surprise, that entire stretches feel thin, foggy, and strangely short, despite having technically lived through them in full. The years weren't stolen. They were simply not written down because nothing about them asked to be written down in the first place. Understanding this changes what it actually means to slow time down. It was never about wishing days would last longer or resenting how quickly a year passes once you blow out the candles. It's about recognizing that your brain is constantly making a decision beneath your awareness about what deserves to be remembered and what doesn't. And that decision is not fixed. It responds directly to how much unfamiliar territory you're willing to put yourself through. So the next time a year disappears behind you faster than you expected, understand what's actually happening. Your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do, filtering out the familiar and holding on to the rare. The days that blur together were never wasted. They were simply too similar to each other to leave a mark. But the ones that felt strange, uncomfortable, new, those are the ones still sitting there in your memory, fully formed, waiting for you to look back on them. Think back to a summer when you were 8 years old. It felt endless because everything in it was happening to you for the very first time. The strange truth is that feeling was never reserved for childhood. It was reserved for whatever you were brave enough to make unfamiliar, and that door is still wide open for as long as you're willing to walk through it